This is way too much about ozone in Chapter 4. The wavelengths screened by ozone happen to be precisely the wavelengths absorbed by 1W. I think that should be a mu, and it probably means micron, but I really don't know. Just says here 1W period. I think that's a Greek letter mu. When radiation is absorbed, it turns to heat, which can damage cells. Less understood, but long suspected, is that organisms living near the ocean's surface may be killed in minutes by increased ultraviolet light, and that farm crops can be harmed. Scientists have been testing these effects in experiments with lamps intensified in the short wavelengths like the sun lamps used in tanning salons, and with lasers tuned to precise frequencies. And the aliens did all this research 200,000 years ago, and they have 200,000 years of data from their theories and solutions, and they could give that to us easily just to help us. Instead, we've got to suffer through our own 200,000 years of experimentation. When the message on the depletion of the ionosphere was originally transmitted to Edward Meyer by the Pleiadian extraterrestrials, he was told to transmit it directly to Professor Michael McElroy at Harvard, and the Pleiadians provided the postal address. The letter was sent. A most sobering situation here indeed. Either one of these drastic changes in the Earth's environment holds great dangers for all living things on this planet. Now, I want to stop here and say one sentence. If they really wanted to impress McElroy at Harvard, why didn't they land in his backyard, pick him up, and give him a ride, and talk to him on the spaceship? Now, would that be convincing? They can tell him what they found and give him the results, and he can take them with him back to his lab. They can communicate with him telepathically after that, and he'll be a believer. But just mailing this stuff off like some crackpot is not going to be very effective. What's wrong with these people? Okay, so either of these drastic changes in the Earth's environment holds great dangers for all living things on this planet. This was all predictable and was caused by man himself. And when we failed to realize our danger and ignored what we were doing to ourselves, no, what some of us were doing to the others of us is more like it. Why are we all one now? You know, are we sharing in the profits of the oil business as if we were all one? One guy has 94 Rolls Royces in Russia. That's not equal sharing. I don't want to share this responsibility and blame. Is what we're doing to ourselves. Benevolent extraterrestrials beings took it upon themselves to warn us. Yeah, in all the wrong ways. A warning that has gone unheeded because of the way that we were warned, to the point that the damage is done and the dangers are now irreversible. And whose fault is that? Who is the superior race here? If this is not cause for alarm, nothing is. Okay, thank you, Wendell. Remember, we were warned back in early 1975. We? Who was warned? You're warning people who have no idea what even causes it? And we were given figures and rates then by extraterrestrial observers at that time. Well, if the ETs are going to hide from us and not come out in the open and say, hey, look, we're here, we're real, we're giving you this information, take it seriously. Give them a ride in the spaceship to prove that it's real. You know, I don't understand how they think. The 26th contact on the 18th of June 1975 took place at the very early hour of 4 a.m., 4:11 a.m., where an interesting bit of information was developed. Sannyasi opened the conversation this time. She says, regretfully, a longer conversation is not possible for me now because I am obligated for a special task. Thus, in the coming time, I will not be able to come in contact with you as often. Please understand that we have to space out contacts more in time. Meyer asks, are you still going away? Sannyasi says, as I have been ordered, but I'm not leaving your solar system. Meyer asks, what about this moment with the demonstration? Sannyasi says, this does not deal with me. I think that should be this does not deal with my longer trip, before which I want to exercise the demonstration. Meyer says, I see. I thought we were finally at this point. Semyasi says, the time for that does not press, as I still have a lot to do before this. My new task is taking me only to some planets of your system and to your satellite, the moon. I want to go to these places. This is in connection with something that has happened since our last meeting. What happened? Which planets is she going to? What is she going to do there? How does she breathe in those atmospheres? Does she wear some sort of a spacesuit? Okay, then the editor makes a note. Since this material was received by us and translated for publication here, we have become involved in the investigation and publication of a very profound and extensive UFO case involving some extraterrestrial beings who seem to have an operating base on our moon that is set up about every 2 years and is manned and is used actively for something like 6 months, and then they leave and are gone for around 18 months before they come back again. This timing would fit a retrogressed cycle of the events we have been able to observe up to now. See UFO Abduction at Mirasol by Dr. Walter K. Buehler, this publisher. In a discussion about a space project, Meyer inquired if the Pleiadians had ever interfered in such projects and received a startling reply. Semyasi said, surely, but not we alone. We have followed the whole development and also influenced it in certain measures. I think that should be. On the other hand, we have had to trouble ourselves for the eliminations in different cases or to help projects fail. Meyer says that sounds like you have sometimes interfered in matters. Semyasi says, surely, if you want to consider it so. Meyer says, I want to tell it that way. There is something not fully evident for me, because you just made a strange comment that you are not the only ones who are keeping their eyes and ears open in these concerns and have interfered. Are you concealing something from me? And this not only now, for some time I have noticed you're having a secret ahead of me, where it always seemed like you were waiting for my question. Semyasi asks, can't you imagine what it is? Meyer says, I'm having my assumptions here. Semyasi says, then tell it. Meyer says, I'm not stupid, as later it will sound from the other side like I made a fool of myself. And Semyasi said, your sudden fear is unknown for you. It does not fit. Meyer says, all right, you've got me. You know very well fear is no stranger to me, and that you are taking unfair advantage. And Semyasi says, surely, but I had to be unfair. Meyer says, well, it deals with the following. Already for some time I have assumed that besides yourselves are still other extraterrestrials hunting along in our world, but having different wishes and hopes, each according to his own. These creatures could be strange to your race, at least some of them, while others might rise from your race itself. Semyasi says, yes, surely, but speak on. Meyer says, I can imagine that not all of the extraterrestrials who interfere in such concerns here on Earth have the best intentions for us, but where it is not evident as to why you allow them to continue, I think. It's a strange sentence. I don't know really what they were saying. Semyasi says, because each form of life is justified in its own existence and thinks and acts according to its own character and form, we are not allowed to interfere if not necessary for survival. Thus we are only allowed to be active in a way of teaching. But go on speaking. Meyer says, that explains your behavior, and I see it as logical. So I start from the assumption that certain strange to you forms of life from the widths of the universe are hunting along on our Earth and in cosmic space, and possibly trying to influence other forms of life in different ways. On the other hand, I also assume that there are one or several groups of descendants of your ancient race who have not yet returned to you, and in consequence still live according to the ancient forms and still influence many forms of life, as well as the earth humans according to that factum. Never heard of that word before, factum. And appear as messengers of a M.E. I don't know what that means. It is evident to me that concerning this you have not told me the whole truth, as we have talked about these things several times before this. Boy, this is really bold. He's going to create a problem with her. Sannyasi says, I have never told you anything but the truth. Meyer says, then let me explain it another way. About this whole matter that you have told me, only half the truth, and only half explained that. Sannyasi says, your explanation is true. Meyer says, very kind of you, but why haven't you told me all? Sannyasi says, the time has not been mature for that. In your assumption, you are right, because there are other creatures in Earth space than ours alone. There are as well some splinter groups of our own ancient race who came here as well as visiting other worlds, and they still live according to older ways. They try to influence life forms, especially Earth humans, according to their manner. As their ancestors appeared like gods, so also do some of these. Concerning the above, Meyer further explained, for our benefit, that there is an important doctrine for peace and survival within the creation. No single creature is given primitive dominance or paramount authority over any other, though Earthman chooses to elect himself to this position, and they all exist equally within the vast creation. Whenever anyone arrogates superiority to himself and sets out to carry a stick or sets himself up as an authority, he must be aware that there is always another with a bigger stick. Each creature within the creation goes its own way in evolution and is allowed free rein unless and until it becomes dangerous and a menace to any other. One does not interfere with another without just cause. Thus many different UFO entities may come and go without specific interference, as long as they observe the natural law of the creation. Meyer explained that there are always backsliders and imperfections in every evolution that get stuck at certain levels for a time and are then passed up by the more progressive, but they too will in time catch up again. However, we do also have some human races evolved beyond us, but behind the Pleiadians, and some of them are Pleiadian laggards, here, observing, and some even attempting to impose their will on Earth humans. These are allowed their freedom to evolve, like all others, so long as they do not become a direct danger to life and being. Such, according to the Pleiadians, are the IHWH descendants, still coming here from their present refuge planets. On Wednesday, the 25th of June, 1975, at 2:37 in the afternoon, the 27th contact took place. Meyer was chastised for being late. Sannyasi says, today you are not in a hurry. I had to call you several times. Meyer was getting a little tired of the constant demands on his time, energy, and resources, and was beginning to feel like he had seen enough of the extraterrestrial woman and the spacecraft. He was being criticized by his friends for not producing more and for not getting them into contracts too, or at least where they could see more. And he was being criticized by the extraterrestrials for not meeting their objectives more rapidly and for failing to turn his friends into a more active support group. The newness of these exotic contacts had worn off, and he was really in no hurry to rush off to another call. Always long distances away, over difficult and trying routes, and usually in bad weather or very late at night, and sometimes both. Though this one was coming in mid-afternoon. He was babysitting the children at the time, and when his wife returned he did not respond. taking his camera and riding off on his moped, and he finally arrived at the site of the contact, not really expecting them to be there after so long a time, and not particularly caring whether they were or not. So Meyer says, "By regret, I couldn't simply go away, for my wife was not at home, so I had to watch the children." Semjase said, "Because of that, I had to call you for longer than an hour. Today I have a surprise for you." Semjase said they were there with 3 beam ships and that she had permission to take him on a first trip with them. This was reported in the preliminary investigation report. She had provided an empty seat in her ship and took Meyer aboard. He was able to photograph the other 2 ships as they were starting their departure on this unforgettable occasion. Wow, this sounds great. For greater events, Semjase had frequently arrived with additional protective craft which remained screened from sight. For the 3rd of April night demonstration when Meyer was injured, she had 4 protective craft which remained invisible to sight. It was because of this that she was able to safely land and treat Meyer's broken rib. Incidentally, she told him at that time that he had 2 other ribs that had been previously broken, which had not healed straight. Checking back later, he discovered that he may have broken ribs in something else, but having no opportunity to treat them at the time, allowing them to heal by themselves. Why can't she straighten out those crooked ribs? If they can heal them that fast, they could certainly make the bone flexible and then straighten them and then make it solid again. This completely unexpected and mind-blowing change of events turned Meyer around again, and he began to take more serious and even avid interest in these Pleiadian cosmonauts and their objectives. He began to rouse his friends to activity and purge the doubters from the inner group privileges. He began to take the tightened inner group more closely into his confidence, and as they became active helpers, he was allowed to share some inside information with them. Thus was formed the inner core of those who began to surround him. Soon of these were even singled out by name and given information, and sometimes even objects, to let them know that they were accepted by the extraterrestrials, and also to keep their personal interest up. I think you can be sure that if these people had money, that they would be in the inner circle as long as they were able to contribute. Now I understand why so many people were asked for money to have privy to this information, and they tried to commercialize it because they desperately needed money. And it created a lot of stress within the group. I'd like to know more about these 25 people that lived in this group. Randy Winters talks about them, but he doesn't talk about them individually, and he doesn't talk about their financial situation. The 28th contact was by thought transmission with no face-to-face meeting to be recommunicated for record. The reception process was the same, however, as for that of the contact notes. In this process, however it is done, there is an interaction between the communicator and the receiver, and the transmission can be interrupted as in a conversation, and questions may be asked, with immediate answers provided. The reception is by automatic writing or typing at high speed without pauses or interruptions until the end of the thought being communicated at the time. That communicated received on Friday, the 27th of June 1975, at 10:47 in the morning, introduced another Pleiadian, a male who Meyer was told he could call Quetzal. This Pleiadian man was described as the supervisor of the Pleiadian Earth base high in the Alps near the Italian and French borders. Oh, so that's who Quetzal was. He was the supervisor of a base. It was not far from Mount Blanc. A number of Pleiadian humans and occasionally intelligent human beings from other space-traveling races are especially conditioned to live on the surface of our planet here. They operate an array of monitoring equipment. Among other things, Quetzal laid down some rules about the contact notes which clearly we have been unable to follow. We are therefore in violation of their rules, and are in fact forbidden to publish these contact notes. It is easy to see that we cannot abide by their rules on publication of these notes, as we would be legally vulnerable in a number of ways. We have had to purge the names and certain data to be safe, and thereby are also guilty of publishing these notes out of context, which was also prohibited. We have done so anyway, as we have done at risk of being deprived of all further information. Had we not done this, you would know little of the Pleiadian contacts in Switzerland. But here is what Quetzal said. A further point must be made in respect to the contact notes. As we have seen, you finally trouble yourselves for the finishing of the contact notes for release. Here a factor comes to our attention, which is not our intention, as we have discussed in this respect formerly and very thoroughly. According to the view of some of your members, the reports should be elaborated and spread only partly, leaving all personal concerns, etc., out of the finished version. With that, we cannot agree from our side. Our decision continues, in consequence, that the reports shall be published according to the fixed words, letter by letter, exactly at hand. By that are as well included all personal affairs, which in consequence then are not to be left out. The reports are only worthy and complete when they are revealed word by word and contain all the facts. This is an objective based on very thorough deliberations and logic. All personal and other matters, which are not mentioned in the reports and are not admitted and should not be published, as these, since the beginning, were spared from the reports. All the present contact reports contain exactly the matters to be offered and explained to Earth humankind. We cannot accept any deletion of any facts, explanations, information, or other parts of the conversations. In this respect, all must be included, even if certain matters are undelightful for some persons. But this not only concerns some of your members, but as well ourselves, because we still make unrecognized mistakes. We expect now a recognition of the mentioned mistakes and their removal. It is not very delightful for us if we have to constantly trouble ourselves in this respect. Once we give an explanation or an order, then it should be enough. It should never happen that matters have to be repeated several times and discussed. In this respect, we also have ordered Samyasi to omit in the future any kinds of repetitions of a once explained factor. For what has once been explained and discussed needs no further explanations. I disagree with that philosophy. People don't always get it the first time. Sometimes you have to put it in a different form, say it a different way, a different time. Sometimes people are not concentrating, they don't pick it up. Continuing, this is not only time-consuming but illogical and superfluous. By no means do we try to exercise dictatorial measures or to force our will or our knowledge on any earth beings. We only have undertaken a self-imposed mission to transmit lessons of truth and some other things. Those who want to accept and acknowledge this may do so by their own decision, and one who wants to refuse may also do that. The acknowledging ones must be aware that quite defined principles are necessary to preserve order. Thus, special objectives and orders must be observed, as well as not omitting certain assistance expected of me. The group members around Meyer had sensibly decided to edit and leave out sensitive comments and all direct references to personalities mentioned in the notes before any release outside the group. Quetzal's position is that they, the Pleiadians, have already purged what they think should be left out before the contact notes were transmitted, and that they do not need purging anymore. That's a strange way of thinking. Some of those comments are damaging to certain personalities, and even libelous under our laws. So we have had to take exception to Quetzal's demand, and have edited and deleted as we considered appropriate. The 29th contact took place on Monday, the 7th of May, 1975, at 10:30 in the morning, and this was another of the face-to-face meetings. The first part of the discussion pertained to Carl Viet's visit. Apparently, he's a German UFO investigator. In an earlier contact, Meyer had asked for and been given the names of several recognized UFO contactees, whom the Pleiadians thought were deceivers. During the Veit visit, he mentioned these deceivers in good faith to Carl, trusting the allegations of the ETs. Some of them happened to be contactees whom Herr Veit was quite convinced were legitimately real. As a matter of fact, we do agree with Carl on some of them. Now Meyer has decided to confront the Pleiadians over this matter. Meyer says, "On that I wanted to ask you a question too. The V's are convinced that some of the names you mentioned as deceivers are not guilty of such deceit. What do you say to that?" Semyasi, we have recorded your hours-long discussions, and I am informed about them quite thoroughly. But I also explained before that you would have a very troublesome position. This has come true, as you do know. This troublesome position will continue for you in the future as well. The more we have looked into different places, the more we find certain things against you in progress, and intrigues are being built up against you. From different quarters you have been for some time watched very thoroughly and very tightly controlled, while already some wicked-minded elements are also plotting intrigues against you. In consequence, be very careful in every respect. Evil tongues are accusing you of espionage for foreign powers, while others are accusing you of deceit, by which they seek to prevent you from spreading the truth. These elements, on the one side, belong to religious circles, and on the other, a still secret organization desiring to suppress what you say. Certain lines in this respect are running to different secret alliances and confederations, as well as to officials in the military, and to certain individuals who feel menaced by what you say. Certain other elements are working against you, because if you are proven right, they could be accused of deceit. Meyer says, "You give me a fantastic outlook, Semyasi, but actually I have calculated with things like that." Semyasi says, "You had to because you do know these things from earlier times." As we got into this UFO investigation, we, the investigators, came under tight investigation by somebody else and began to notice many strange and unbelievable things happening. Our telephones were tapped. Our mail was intercepted, and we were followed. Total strangers made appointments with us, or simply intercepted us and warned us to back off. We were picked up by special agents and questioned. We were stopped in different countries en route to and from Switzerland, and were interrogated and sometimes given instructions by one service, and then another, and then again differently by another, leading us to believe that they were not in contact with each other. Every time we visited the Meyer farm, we noticed that a military strong point was set up on the hill overlooking the Meyer house, with a clear view right down into the family living room. We received threats by mail and by telephone, and were occasionally intimidated in person. Whenever we went to one or another of the contact sites, or photo sites where the UFO pictures were we saw low-flying reconnaissance spotter craft pass over our heads, and we even photographed some of them. It was quite obvious that we were the ones being watched. Meyer continued to press his advantage. He says, "You mentioned something in the last meeting. You told me that I could once come with you to the Pleiades." Semyasi, "Surely, but this will only be a short part of a larger trip, because the aim, seen from Earth, is many light years distant." Meyer says, "My dear, this is fantastic. I only wanted to take photographs there. By regret, the last pictures have nearly all been about the travel to Saturn. Either they were overexposed or the film was just black." Semyasi says, "This unfortunately had to be expected because you may need for such cases special equipment." Meyer says, "Nevertheless, I will try again on the next trip. If just some of the pictures would be successful for me, even halfway, then I'm content." I wonder if these Pleiadians breathe oxygen. I wonder what is the right percentage of oxygen for them. And I wonder if the Earth was set up with that oxygen level, and if we have a common percentage of oxygen that's ideal for both the Pleiadians and the Earth humans. Semyasi says, "Besides this, there is a chance that we will take you up with us, again, on the next meeting for a further special flight. More, we also want to see whether you are able to make certain pictures, for we have produced in this aim a special apparatus." Meyer says, "What shall I photograph?" Semyasi says, "You will recognize this soon enough. But now my time is over again, for I still have to carry out different duties." On Tuesday, the 15th of July, 1975, at 9:46 a.m., one of the by now becoming familiar thought transmissions, the 30th contact, was received. This contact advised Meyer of and instructed him to prepare a longer absence for this proposed trip. Semyasi says, "I have received your different thoughts, but could not respond immediately, as my present task occupies me very much. And as I now take up contact with you today, it will be, for certain reasons, for only a short time. Prepare yourself to be ready in the early morning hours of the 17th of July, which is within 2 days. At a given time, I will call you then and take you from a suited location. You should equip yourself with sufficient film material, as this will be of some importance. Prepare yourself further to be absent for a longer time, because you will undertake a further flight, which is not possible even to many space-traveling creatures. Within this universe are few forms of life able to overcome such great distances, because this is only possible through hyperspace. Where this has been made possible by advanced technical developments, the universe offers no limits. Also, space and time are no longer barriers, and so as well the barrier between universes can be negotiated. As you know from former times, so also are known time journeys for certain forms of life." Meyer asks, "Do you know these things?" Semyasi, "Surely, as asked it is well known to me. But please do not interrupt me, because my time for this contact is very short. We will not be able to accomplish the coming travel in my small ship, as for such trips it is unsuited. We shall go over to a great space-fitted ship, so prepare for altogether at least 30 hours of your time to be absent, because this ship we will travel far outside the stars' formations known to. More also, you should have an opportunity to make some pictures, and possibly to view from a distance the ancient home planet of our human races." Oh. "Today it presents a peculiar sight, originating in the destruction of a great star. The destruction took place a very long time ago. Because of its unlike shape, this formation is called IHWHHATA. This name means, translated into your language, Eye of God. According to your astronomical catalogs, you find this Eye of God within the stars of Lyra, and you call it the Ring Nebula of Lyra, or H57. These are the concerns I had to report today. If now you still have a question, then I have a short time to answer." Meyer asks, "I feel myself placed into a kingdom of fantasy, Semyasi, but tell me, Where in the sky or heaven can I find this eye of God? Sannyasi: to do this you need a bigger telescope. Sannyasi later explained that their ancestors and ours descended from the refugees from that great sun system, some of whom fled to the Pleiades and other places in their escape from destruction. Meyer says, a pity in respect to the planned journey. I still have one question. When I count the distance in kilometers, what is the number? Sannyasi says it exceeds all your mathematical possibilities of calculation manyfold. Telling the number which I could give you, but only in my terms, would in consequence be absurd. Meyer says, but then a few hours will not be sufficient. Sannyasi says, you forget about the negation of time and space by hyperspace. And Meyer asks, dear me, then this will become just a short trip to the end of the universe, a travel into eternity, so to speak? And Sannyasi says, your thoughts are wrong, for we don't reach an end of the universe, for such an end does not exist. The author says, apparently time and space as we understand them in our material universe are physical properties of our material continuum, which may be bypassed by raising the vibrations of the field with any protective field to a frequency above the physical-chemical realm, where the laws and properties of the material world no longer constrain matter, and all in the field responds to the new laws simultaneously, such as for spirit. The big day, the 31st contact, was on Thursday, the 17th of July, 1975, when the Pleiadians picked up Meyer at a very carefully selected location at 10:14 a.m. for this 31st contact with the extraterrestrials in less than 6 months. Edward J. Meyer had made his plans as required, allowing for an absence of over 30 hours. He got up early and completed his preparations. He loaded his bike and waited for the signal. When it came and the rendezvous point was identified, he bid farewell to his family and started out for the remote and very inaccessible location, so difficult to negotiate, even with his moped, that it would certainly discourage followers. Arriving at the signified location, he unloaded the equipment he would carry and carefully hid his vehicle against accidental discovery. Shortly after this, the spacecraft arrived, and he was greeted by the now quite familiar extraterrestrial woman. He looked at his watch. It was 10:14, and he was immediately taken into the ship along with his equipment brought for the trip. They rose into the ship in a beam of energy, and it took right off on the greatest event in Meyer's entire life. After that trip, he was brought back to the same spot, retrieved his moped, still undisturbed, and rode all the way home in wonder and contemplation. He was totally exhausted and went right to bed and slept. After resting from the strain of all the excitement, Meyer got up, washed his face, and went out and settled himself at his desk in the little shed to receive the transmission. Suddenly he was tuned in, and the transmission was received as before, rapidly, continuously, with no repeats and no stopping for corrections, in one long, uninterrupted run until the first transmission was complete. He had filled scores of pages. Then he was allowed to rest for a day, and another segment came through the same way. This was repeated a number of times until the full account had been received and documented there on paper. Some of this contact had already been reported in the preliminary investigation report. More will be reported in a greater presentation of the Pleiadian messages at a future time. For our purpose now, we shall abstract from the reports a little more of the time aboard the great spacer mother ship. End of chapter 4. Yay, it's over! To us easily just to help us. Instead, we've got to suffer through our own 200,000 years of experimentation. When the message on the depletion of the ionosphere was originally transmitted to Edward Meyer by the Pleiadian extraterrestrials, he was told to transmit it directly to Professor Michael McElroy at Harvard, and the Pleiadians provided the postal address. The letter was sent. A most sobering situation here indeed. Either one of these drastic changes in the Earth's environment holds great dangers for all living things on this planet. Now, I want to stop here and say one sentence. If they really wanted to impress McElroy at Harvard, why didn't they land in his backyard, pick him up, and give him a ride, and talk to him on the spaceship? Now, would that be convincing? They can tell him what they found and give him the results, and he can take them with him back to his lab. They can communicate with him telepathically after that, and he'll be a believer. But just mailing this stuff off like some crackpot is, okay, thank you, Wendell. Remember, we were warned back in early 1975. We? Who was warned? You're warning people who have no idea what even causes it? And we were given figures and rates then by extraterrestrial observers at that time. Well, if the ETs are going to hide from us and not come out in the open and say, hey, look, we're here, we're real, we're giving you this information, take it seriously. Give them a ride in the spaceship to prove that it's real. You know, I don't understand how they think. The 26th contact on the 18th of June 1975 took place at the very early hour of 4 a.m., 4:11 a.m., where an interesting bit of information was developed. Samyasi opened the conversation this time. She says, regretfully, a longer conversation is not possible for me now because I am obligated for a special. It's not going to be very effective. What's wrong with these people? Okay, so either of these drastic changes in the Earth's environment holds great dangers for all living things on this planet. This was all predictable and was caused by man himself. And when we failed to realize our danger and ignored what we were doing to ourselves, no, what some of us were doing to the others of us is more like it. Why are we all one now? You know, are we sharing in the profits of the oil business as if we were all one? One guy has 94 Rolls Royces in Russia. That's not equal sharing. I don't want to share this responsibility and blame. Is what we're doing to ourselves. Benevolent extraterrestrials beings took it upon themselves to warn us. Yeah, in all the wrong ways. A warning that has gone unheeded because of the way that we were warned, to the point that the damage is done and the dangers are now irreversible. And whose fault is that? Who is the superior race here? If this is not cause for alarm, nothing is. This is way too much about ozone in Chapter 4. The wavelengths screened by ozone happen to be precisely the wavelengths absorbed by 1W. I think that should be a mu, and it probably means micron, but I really don't know. Just says here 1W period. I think that's a Greek letter mu. When radiation is absorbed, it turns to heat, which can damage cells. Less understood, but long suspected, is that organisms living near the ocean's surface may be killed in minutes by increased ultraviolet light, and that farm crops can be harmed. Scientists have been testing these effects in experiments with lamps intensified in the short wavelengths like the sun lamps used in tanning salons, and with lasers tuned to precise frequencies. And the aliens did all this research 200,000 years ago, and they have 200,000 years of data from their theories and solutions, and they could give that to task. Thus, in the coming time, I will not be able to come in contact with you as often. Please understand that we have to space out contacts more in time. Meyer asks, are you still going away? Samyasi says, as I have been ordered, but I'm not leaving your solar system. Meyer asks, what about this moment with the demonstration? Samyasi says, this does not deal with me. I think that should be this does not deal with my longer trip, before which I want to exercise the demonstration. Meyer says, I see. I thought we were finally at this point. Sannyasi says, "The time for that does not press, as I still have a lot to do before this. My new task is taking me only to some planets of your system and to your satellite, the moon. I want to go to these places." This is in connection with something that has happened since our last meeting.